If you're like me and you grew up in Texas, you probably don't remember a whole lot from the Texas history class we all had to take. And if you didn't grow up in Texas, then chances are that Alamo is your main point of reference. But the question I want to answer is, how did this massive territory go from a wild frontier to one of the largest economies in the world? This video is sponsored by Motion VFX. When Christopher Columbus accidentally discovered the New World, it set off this long period of European colonization of the Americas. Great Britain, Spain, France, Portugal, and the Netherlands all made claims to land in this new world. In 1519, Spanish explorer Alfonso Álvarez de Pineda sailed from Jamaica and became the first European to map the Texas coastline. However, it wouldn't be until 1528, 9 years later, that the Spanish actually set foot on Texas land. An expedition of 90 men led by Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca shipwrecked near present-day Galveston. The native Carancagua tribe provided food and shelter for the 90 men, but only 15 survived the winter. It took Cabeza de Vaca 8 years to make it back to Mexico City, but this provided the opportunity for Cabeza de Vaca to be the first European to explore the Texas interior. In the span of those 8 years, Cabeza de Vaca and his men failed to find any gold or immense riches, but they returned to Mexico City with myths and tales of treasures and other places in North America. By this time, Spain had established their reign in modern-day Mexico, but this pattern of seeking riches up north in modern-day Texas continued until 1542. Luis de Moscoso de Alvarado's failed expedition, combined with constant conflict and violence with the local Native Americans, convinced Spain to stop explorations in their northern frontier. The Spanish crown's most important goal at that time was finding great wealth to further exert their power around the world, and this wasn't happening in Texas. The region would be pretty much ignored by the Europeans for the next 100 years. Okay, so let's fast forward now to the early 1700s. No European nation has yet laid a solid foundation in Texas. The French made claims, but failed to establish a colony, and Spain's efforts to establish Catholic missions in East Texas were pretty much a failure. Spain knew that in order to solidify their rule over Texas, they had to bring Spanish settlers to live on the land, but few were willing. Life on the frontier was hard, filled with all sorts of challenges, disease, hostile relationships with Native Americans, and very limited supplies. So Spain's solution was to establish Catholic missions, which would convert Native Americans to Catholicism and teach them how to be good Spanish citizens. This, of course, was a total disaster. Very few Native Americans wanted to learn Spanish, become Catholic, and live for the king. It's honestly terrible that Spain thought this would yield good results. But in 1718, Spain was able to establish Misión San Antonio de Valero, which more than a century later would be the stage for one of Texas' most legendary events. Okay, so Misión San Antonio de Valero is established, and 75 years later, the Spanish crown decides to secularize the mission, which basically meant that Catholic instruction stopped at the location and the property was divided among the families and individuals that lived at the mission. By now, the 1800s are just around the corner, and Spain is starting to feel more threatened by French and now American explorers and colonists, so they decide to send soldiers to Misión San Antonio. The first group of soldiers to arrive were part of a cavalry unit called La Segunda Compañía Volante de San Carlos de Parras. Amazing name. But they were also known as the Alamo Company due to their hometown of Alamo de Parras in present-day Coahuila, Mexico. The soldiers arrived in 1803, built barracks inside the mission, and actually established the first hospital in Texas on the second floor of the mission. As time went by and the soldiers and their families made San Antonio their home, the mission simply became known as the Alamo. It was still far away, but an epic battle was slowly making its way to history's never-ending pages. Spain's control over their colonies in the Americas was quickly unraveling, and in 1821, Mexico gained its independence from Spain. This meant Texas was now Mexico's most northern state, and in order to help establish a stronger presence, the Mexican government encouraged American and other foreigners to settle in Texas on the condition that they become Mexican citizens, learn Spanish, and adopt the Catholic faith. That again didn't work out well, but they did offer new settlers the incentive of no taxes for 7 years, and even though slavery was illegal in Mexico, American immigrants were allowed to continue using slaves. One of the most famous Americans to secure a land grant was Moses Austin, but it was his son, Stephen F. Austin, who ended up fulfilling what his father had started. In 1824, Austin and 300 families settled on the Brazos River. The population of Americans grew quickly, and most of these settlers felt no allegiance to Mexico and its culture. Many settlers started to call themselves Texians. The Mexican government quickly realized that they could lose control of Texas, and on April 6, 1830, immigration from the United States was banned. Mexico's very young government was struggling, and in 1833, General Antonio López de Santa Anna led a successful coup against President Anastasio Bustamante. Initially, Texans supported General Santa Anna, as it was believed he would give Mexican states more autonomy and power, but Santa Anna abolished Mexico's 1824 constitution and centralized the government. By this time, Texas had been joined to the neighboring state of Coahuila, but Texans wanted to be, at the very least, an independent state within Mexico. So in 1833, 56 delegates from Texas wrote a resolution asking that they be separated from Coahuila, that the immigration ban from the United States be removed, and that Texans be exempted from anti-slavery laws. Stephen F. Austin went down to Mexico City to present the proposal to Santa Anna, and he ended up being imprisoned for inciting insurrection. The Mexican government did decide to allow immigration from the United States once again, but did not grant Texas statehood. Stephen F. Austin was imprisoned for about 18 months and returned to Texas to find that revolution was just around the corner. Tensions between Texas and Mexico were at an all-time high, and on October 2, 1835, the Mexican army was sent to the small town of Gonzales to recover a cannon that had been loaned out to the town for defense against Native Americans. Texans led by Colonel John H. Moore famously rolled out the cannon under a flag that had "Come and Take It" written on it. Texan forces at Gonzales grew from 18 men to 180 throughout the day, and the first shots of the Texas Revolution were fired. The Mexican army was forced to retreat from Gonzales to San Antonio, and 6 months later, on March 1, 1836, 59 delegates drafted the Texas Declaration of Independence at Washington on the Brazos, which is modern-day about 45 miles northwest of Houston. On March 2nd, the declaration was signed, and the delegates also wrote up the Texas Constitution. David G. Burnett was chosen as interim president, Sam Houston was appointed as commander of the army, and Stephen F. Austin was chosen to go to the United States in order to secure aid and volunteers for the revolution. While all of this was happening, General Santa Anna had been marching north towards Texas with an army of around 6,000 men. Determined to punish the rebellious Texans, Santa Anna headed towards the Alamo. Alright, so before we continue talking about Texas history, I wanted to thank Motion VFX for sponsoring today's video. Motion VFX makes the most professional plugins, effects, and templates for Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, Premiere Pro, and Apple Motion. I have been editing with Final Cut Pro for over 5 years, and I have used various different plugins, but I can sincerely say that none of them has been as good as Motion VFX. The thought and design of every product they offer is top quality. You have so much control and customization options to create videos that captivate and engage your audience. I was really pumped when they reached out, as I had already been a customer for a few years, and a lot of the effects you have seen during this video are from Motion VFX's M Documentary Pack. If you are an editor or someone who is interested in creating videos, I highly recommend you check out Motion VFX. The link to their website is down below in the description. Let's get back to the Alamo. General Santa Anna and his army arrived in San Antonio on February 23, 1836. The Texas Army had been fortifying San Antonio, and specifically the Alamo, as they knew a Mexican counterattack was just a matter of time. San Antonio was strategically located along an important road that connected Mexico and Texas, so maintaining control of the Alamo was crucial for the Texas Army. However, they were completely outnumbered. Led by Colonel William B. Travis and Colonel James Bowie, Texas forces at the Alamo were around 150 men, and General Santa Anna had arrived with an army of 6,000 men. It is important to note that the Texas Army was made up of Texan settlers, volunteers from the United States, and Mexican settlers living in Texas. The revolution wasn't just American settlers versus the Mexican Army. It was people living in Texas who wanted freedom from the Mexican government. A day after the Mexican army had arrived in San Antonio, Colonel William B. Travis wrote a famous letter addressed to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world. He pleaded for aid at the Alamo and ended his letter with victory or death. Unfortunately, only around 32 men from the town of Gonzales arrived as extra help. The siege on the Alamo lasted for about 12 days, and in the early hours of March 6th, the Mexican army launched a full-scale attack. The attack was swift and ruthless, and at the end, all of the Alamo defenders were dead. One of the most famous Alamo defenders was former Tennessee Congressman and legendary frontiersman Davy Crockett. The Texas troops led by Sam Houston were stationed in the town of Gonzales, which is where the revolution had officially started, but feeling unprepared to face Santa Anna's army, Houston ordered Gonzales to be evacuated and burned. Sam Houston's troops and civilians retreated and headed east. Texas would suffer another tragic loss in the Battle of Coleto Creek, just outside the town of Goliad. Mexican forces led by General José de Urrea overtook Texas troops led by Colonel James Fannin. Fannin surrendered, but Santa Anna gave the order to execute all of Fannin's troops. Around 400 men were killed. About a month and a half after the Alamo, Sam Houston received word that General Santa Anna and his army were camped along the Buffalo Bayou in the San Jacinto River, in what is present-day Houston. On April 21, 1836, Sam Houston ordered a surprise attack with shouts of "Remember the Alamo" and "Remember Goliad." The Mexican army, who was supposedly enjoying an afternoon siesta, was caught completely by surprise, and the battle was over in 18 minutes. Only 9 Texans were killed, while 630 Mexicans lost their lives. General Santa Anna was captured and made to order his army to retreat to Mexico. The Texas Revolution was over, and Texas was officially a republic. Sam Houston is elected as president, and Houston, the city bearing his name, is chosen as the capital city. However, 3 years later, Texas' second president, Mirabeau Lamar, moved the capital to the town of Waterloo and changed the name to Austin in honor of Stephen F. Austin. Texas would only be an independent nation for 10 years, but ever since Texas had gained its independence from Mexico, Texans had voted in favor of joining the United States, but US President Andrew Jackson rejected the proposition. It really was only a matter of time for Texas to become part of the US, and in 1845, the United States Congress approved the annexation of Texas. US President James K. Polk signed the bill, and officially on February 19, 1846, Texas became the 28th state of the Union. This sparked the Mexican-American War, which the US would win handily, and it led to Mexico giving up its claim to Texas and areas in Utah, Nevada, Arizona, California, and Colorado. It was a massive loss for Mexico. Growing tensions between the northern and southern states sparked civil war in 1861, and Texas would secede from the Union and join the Confederacy. Abraham Lincoln would issue the famous Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, freeing all slaves, and the Union would win the Civil War in 1865. Texas was admitted back into the Union in 1870, and the United States entered the era of Reconstruction. The population in Texas started to grow, and the Constitution of 1876 was established. It declared Texas was a free and independent state, subject only to the United States Constitution. I had no idea, but the Texas Constitution of 1876 created the University of Texas and paved the way for the start of Texas A&M. Around 1 million acres of public land were set aside to support the Permanent University Fund. Alright, so it is now the late 1800s. Texas is no longer this wild, desolate frontier, but the economy is still dominated by agriculture, and the state is by no means an economic superpower. So what happens? Oil happens. Black gold. The first major oil discovery in Texas happened accidentally in 1894 in Corsicana. This led to further oil drilling and exploration, and one specific event would dramatically shape Texas' modern history and economy. On January 10, 1901, mining engineer Anthony F. Lucas discovered oil at Spindletop Hill near modern-day Beaumont, Texas. The Lucas Geyser, as it was called, began to spew mud, then natural gas, and finally oil. Tons of oil. The oil flew out as high as 150 feet. The Lucas Geyser was producing around 75,000 barrels of oil per day. A year before the discovery of oil at Spindletop, Texas was producing around 830,000 barrels of oil per year, and after Spindletop, the production went to over 17 million barrels. Beaumont's population went from 10,000 people to 50,000 in a matter of months, and the value of land skyrocketed. The oil boom was Texas' California gold rush. People from all over the world came to try their luck, hoping to find black gold, and the ones who did became millionaires overnight. Major companies like Texaco, Gulf Oil, which is now part of Chevron, and Exxon can trace their origins to Spindletop. It was an epic discovery. This one event changed the course of Texas history, and along with it came a massive wave of investment and economic prosperity. Present day, Texas is very diverse, but oil, gas, and energy still account for a large portion of the economy. According to the Texas Oil and Gas Association's 2022 Economic Impact Report, the Texas oil and natural gas industry paid $24.7 billion in state and local taxes in 2022. It is a staggering amount, shattering 2019's record of $16 billion. Texas is a great state for business. Low tax burden, a large skilled workforce, affordable land, a good transportation system, and seaports have all led to Texas being named the best state for business for 19 years in a row by Chief Executive magazine. Texas is the #1 exporting state in the US, exceeding the exports of California, New York, and Louisiana combined. In the last quarter of 2022, Texas had the fastest GDP growth in the US, and it is the leading destination for companies that are leaving other states. In 2022, Texas led the US in new jobs created by a state with an estimate of 650,000 new jobs. Texas is also home to 53 Fortune 500 companies' headquarters, which is more than any other state. Texas has the second highest GDP of any state in the US, only behind California, and if Texas was a country, it would rank as the 9th largest economy in the world, surpassing countries like Australia, Mexico, Spain, and Russia. It's pretty crazy. So Texas went from wild frontier to independent nation to joining the United States to a world economic superpower. Thank you so much for watching. I seriously appreciate it so much. I'm currently working on my next video, which will look into the history and evolution of Formula One. It's gonna be awesome. And again, seriously, thank you so much for watching. It means so much to me. Let's go, Texas. Peace.